I'm aware that many of you have expressed a desire for online counseling, and to that effect, we have a sponsor who will help you and assist you in that respect. So if you will, go beneath the video, you'll find a link to our online counseling sponsor. They have a whole team of counselors that can help you. Practice self-care, get the help that you need. I want to talk with you today about a very difficult topic in the sense that it's one that tends not to have real good resolution. And that's the topic of parental alienation syndrome. Basically, what we have in this case is mom and dad have had a split between each other, and now they're living in separate places, and one parent is trying to train the child to have the same amount of disdain and contempt towards the other parent as the alienating parent has. Basically, there's a brainwashing, there's a programming going on. Part of the definition of parental alienation is that the parent being alienated doesn't have a strong reason to be alienated other than the fact that mom or dad over here just doesn't like them, and they want to teach the child to have the same amount of hate as that person has. Statistics will show us that about 14 or 15% of cases where mom and dad have split will end in this strong parental alienation pattern. My experience as a therapist says that it actually could be higher than that. Some of the cases may not be as severe, but the fact that there's some of it at all is troubling as far as I'm concerned. Also, statistics will show us that about 68% of the cases of parental alienation involve mom alienating the kids against dad, and about 32% dad alienating the kids against mom. Either direction you want to go, you can see that there are battle lines drawn, and the battlefield is the child's psyche. And it's never going to end well for that, because the child is the one who's hurt the most. Now, when we have this parental alienation, the alienator is very free with criticism towards the other parent. They may do things like, they may say, well, if there are gifts that was given to you by that other parent, they're not allowed here at our house. Or if you have clothing here at our house, you can't take it over there. Or cell phones, or, the rules are very different, and it's very favorable in the alienator's direction, things of that nature. The alienating parent can train the child to distrust not only the other parent, but all the other people associated with that person, grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins and close friends. The alienator has no problem whenever the opportunity arises to manipulate the child's schedule so that he or she doesn't have the same amount of time that they're supposed to have with the other parent. It could be small, like, letting a kid come over and spend the night when, it was time for you to go see dad. But I didn't want to let my little boy or girl have to miss that. Or I've had a case where vacations were planned around somebody else's schedule when it was the other person's schedule to have, things of that nature. Many times the situation is such that the child is trained to be a spy on behalf of the alienator. Who are they with? Was there another woman there? Was there another guy there? How much were they drinking? What about the kids that the other person has? Well, what were they there? What were they like? And the kid can actually become a data collector. Most strongly, the emotions that the alienator has can be transferred into the child. If the parent that's alienating just has a deep disgust, they can just let it be known to the child, you have no idea how much pain that person created in me, or how wrong they are, or how many lies they told, and the child can just be pumped full of all sorts of information that where the child is thinking, well, I feel what you feel. And so there's a splitting that goes on there. Loyalties are divided. If you're loyal to that other parent, then that means you're not loyal to me. And so it has to be one or the other. And the child, typically over time, like I use the term brainwashing, they're brainwashed enough to think, well, I have to stick with you and protect you from this other person over here, when in fact it doesn't have to be that way. Many times when we see things like this, the child himself or herself can be very troubled and emotionally off kilter. Many times you'll hear them actually parrot phraseology that the alienator uses. For example, I remember one dad saying, my daughter said to me that I'm being emotionally dysregulated. What 10-year-old daughter uses terms like emotionally dysregulated? Well, this little girl was being trained by her mother to think negatively towards the father, and somewhere or another she used that, and that's what the little kid thinks. They learn to parrot what the alienating parent says and thinks. Many times the child knows that there's something wrong or difficult that's being played out in their own personal lives by the alienator, but rather than having the strength to stand up to that parent, they just collapse, and it's like it creates more problems than it solves by me saying, I want to be with this other parent. And so they just collapse, and it's like, I don't want that other person because that other person represents difficulty, not because they're a bad person, but because the alienator is making it such that it's just, there's too high of a price to pay. Now, let's suppose you're in a situation where you're on the receiving end of this and you think, well, what do I do? One thing we can say for sure is there is no one size fits all situation here. Sometimes the best thing to do is to be very strict with regard to what the courts require and just say, that's just what we're going to do. Other times doing it that way can actually make it worse, because the child can have so much of a resentment if the alienated parent comes on real strong. So sometimes you wind up having to take a less is more approach. All right, if I don't force the child to come over as much, but we can do it in shorter shots, and sometimes that might make it easier. Sometimes you have to do it that way. Other times it becomes really difficult if you are the alienated parent and now a new person has come into your life, a man or a woman that has kids of their own, and then that becomes part of the battleground, and then you have loyalty to that, and you don't want them exposed to the ex and all. It becomes very complex. In the best case scenario, what I say is, if at all possible, you do want to speak to the child about the differences that are there. What you don't want to do is you don't want to do so in such a way that makes you just like the alienating parent. You don't want to just teach your hate or try to put your hate on the inside. But there might be times when you'll need to simply say something like, what your mother or father is saying is not accurate. And you might even give some illustration of what the inaccuracies are. And again, you have to be very gingerly, because you don't want the child to feel like that other parent is being stepped all over. But then the big thing you do want to do is you want to let it be known, why don't we decide that when it's you and me, then we're going to have certain principles that we operate with. We want to have respect. We want to have cooperation. We want to have open communication. We want to have mutual regard for each other and listening. Would you be willing to work with me? That's what I stand for. And you let it be very clear that who you are is quite distinct and different from that alienating parent, and let that be your best argument. I take what I refer to as the country dog approach in these kind of situations. A country dog has no fence. The city dog, as a contrast, has a fence, and that's what the alienator is wanting to do. The alienating parent wants to say, okay, stay inside of my mold, stay inside my fence, be a mini-me, and we're going to get along just fine. And so that child is trained to stick inside the grooves that parent has laid out for the kid. The country dog approach says, well, I've got my home base here, and I'm here at my home base, but I'm not going to try to force feed anything. I want you to know that as you are desirous to come over freely into my space, I'd love to have you here. And I want to make sure that my availability is something that's well known, it's well established. I'm very tuned into who you are. I'm not in competition with your other parent, but I'm not going to try to force feed something if it's going to mean that we have greater and greater anger and hurt and pain. Sometimes that approach works out well, sometimes it doesn't. I had a case where I had a 46-year-old man who had been alienated from his father at age 13. His mother and grandmother, they had moved to another state, and so for 33 years he didn't talk to his dad, didn't see him. At age 46, he found his father, jumped on an airplane, went and spent a long weekend with him, and came back, and he told me, he said, you know, I was lied to. And I was duped this whole time, that I was told all these negatives, and my dad gave me a perspective, obviously, that I hadn't heard. And now I'm as conflicted as ever. And he had a whole lot of difficulty trying to, his grandmother had passed, trying to come to terms with his mother on this. And he wound up having a good relationship with the dad with a 33-year absence. And I hate it when I see something like that. Basically, if you're on the receiving end of this alienation, you want to take the notion that says, I'm going to do all that I can to keep myself available. I'll drop invitations, I'll send notes and texts and cards and gifts and things like that are appropriate. And when we're there, I'm going to have as much of a positive kind of exchange as I can with that child. I want the child to see what a healthy alternative looks like. When possible, we can discuss some of the difficulties. But if the child is so tethered to the alienating parent that it's like, nope, I don't want to come there, I'm not going to be there, then we take the approach that says, when you're ready, I'm ready. And when you want to engage with me, I'm quite willing. One of the private things that sometimes these parents will say is, my biggest fear is as this child grows and ages, they're going to become the spitting image of that very unhealthy parent. And I'm going to have less and less in common with that child. And that's where my heart just breaks, because that very often can happen. That's why I say it's one of the most difficult things. What you do want to do is keep your lines of communication open, have as much honesty as is necessary or appropriate for the child's psyche. And then you kind of have to take your hands off the control panel, knowing that the more you get into a battle, then the controlling, alienating parent is just going to double down and make it even worse. Keep yourself available, and above all, try not to let the situation completely define you. Remind yourself that you have other people that you can connect with well, who love you and you love them. You can have new and different relationships that you can pour yourself into. And like I say, if that child eventually comes around and has more of a fullness with you, that would be wonderful. But at the same time, you're not going to be so completely tied down that it ruins you as a human, because that's what the alienating parent wants. Now, like I say, this is a very difficult situation, and this is one that doesn't fit a one-size-fits-all kind of resolution, so I would strongly encourage counseling for something like this. If you've not already done so, I would encourage you to hit that subscribe button so we can have more videos coming your way so that you can understand the dynamic of these kind of individuals. We have my Dr. Les Carter channel here. We also have my Surviving Narcissism channel, and obviously this one fits heavily into all of that. If you have a need for counseling, like I said, if there's someone in your area that you could seek out, then I would encourage you to seek that person out. Or if that's not possible, if you prefer differently, we have a sponsor that can take you to a whole host of a team of therapists who are licensed and experienced that can walk you through this in an online counseling setting. We have a link below that can take you to that. In addition, we have my courses, my Free to Be course, and these are extensive courses with lots of videos and worksheets and things like that. We have This Is Me, that's my course about establishing boundaries with controllers. So there are resources so that you can be the healthy person that you need to be, my books, etc. Don't let this so define you that alienating parent brings you down. Know that you are doing your very best when you establish yourself as one that stands for goodness and love and decency. Hopefully the child is able to see that and appreciate it for what it is. If that's not the case, then you can live with a clean conscience. And I'm hoping that you can have a sense that says, I know who I am. I'll not let that very unhealthy other parent define who I am. I need to stay on Team Healthy.